Today we're exploring reversible slip stitch ribs, and I'm thrilled to show you two exclusive reversible patterns. In this video, I'll begin by showing you the stitch patterns and several swatches, starting with basic vertical ribs as a foundation and introducing this special stitch combination to make slip stitch ribs reversible and, of course, awesome. Then I'll discuss the stitch patterns I've developed that use the reversible slip stitch rib. And lastly, some techniques to incorporate reversible slip stitch rib into your projects, especially the cast on and off, and show you some projects that I've made that use reversible slip stitch ribs. What's common for all reversible stitches is that, of course, they look great on both sides and don't have a wrong side. Reversible knitting lies flat and doesn't curl, and the structure and texture are awesome. Let's start with basic vertical ribs as a foundation. Here's a diagram and a swatch of one knit, one purl rib stitch. This stitch pattern is a 2-stitch, 1-row repeat, so naturally reversible. Knits and purls are opposite, so the knit-looking stitches are made with knits on this side of the fabric, stacked with purls on the other side, and the purl-looking stitches are made with purls on this side and knits on the other. Notice how you can only see the purl-looking stitches when I stretch the fabric. As I discussed in detail in the video on the dune stitch, knits sit in front of purls when they're next to each other. This results in the fabric being quite stretchy. 2 knit, 2 purl ribs are similar, but you can see more of the purl-looking stitches at the back. This pattern is a 4-stitch, 1-row repeat. Again, the knits on this side stack with the purls on the other side, and vice versa. The last basic rib I'll show you is 3 knit, 3 purl, a 6-stitch, 1-row repeat. This rib is less stretchy due to the bigger sections of stockinette and reverse stockinette, but it depends on your yarn choice and the tightness of your knitting. As you increase the number of knits and purls in the stitch pattern, you will get some local waving or curling of the fabric, but overall, the fabric lies flat. I use basic ribs in my projects at the ends of scarves for a tapering effect, and then switch to a more interesting looking pattern for the main section. Here's an example with reversible cables. I suggest that if you use ribbing in your project, that you make a swatch first to ensure that the cast on and cast off edges and the salve edges are to your liking before you commit to your main project. Later in the video, I have some tips on how to make all the edges look good for any kind of ribbing. Let's add a variation to make the 3 knit, 3 purl rib look a bit more interesting. Here, I've slipped the middle stitch on the knit-looking side and worked it only on the purl-looking side. You can also do this vice versa. Now it has the distinctive look of a slip stitch pattern since the knits and purls are worked twice as often as the slip stitches, making them elongated. The stitch on the purl section pulls the fabric in a bit to accentuate the wavy nature. I really like the look of this slip stitch. It's a great pattern in its own right. But I think we can do even better. Now that we have the basic vertical ribs covered, I'll introduce the special stitch combination that is fundamental to making slip stitch rib patterns reversible in a better way. The stitch combination is a small snippet of double knitting. Generally, double knitting fabric is made by knitting 2 layers of fabric simultaneously that are attached to each other at the edges. The stitches on the needles are in pairs, where the first stitch is knit and the second stitch is slipped for every row. There are many variations on this basic principle to make many wonderful stitch patterns, especially for reversible color work, like this scarf here. I'll make a video exploring reversible double knitting in the future. For this video, the key idea is that the slip stitch rib is made with a single pair of layered stitches that are knit on one side of the fabric and slipped on the other. More on the actual mechanics in just a minute. Around this fundamental reversible slip stitch rib, you can incorporate whatever reversible stitch pattern you like. Let's first combine it with a basic rib from earlier. Here's a scarf that I've been working on. I'm using a yarn with some flecking that I got in Scotland. When I first saw this stitch pattern forming fabric on my needles, I was so excited. It was so much better than I expected, and definitely better than the one-sided slip stitch that I've used before. I like the natural texture, and I also like how it looks stretched out a bit. Let me know in the comments if you have a preference. here's what it looks like on the other side. Big surprise for this channel, it looks the same. Let's take a closer look at how it's constructed. If I focus in on this column of 3 knit-looking stitches, notice how the stitches in the middle look longer than those on the sides. This is the slip stitch that has been knit only on this side. You can see there are 4 loops on the needle in this section, a knit, the knit-slip combination, and a second knit. Looking at the next section, you can see a purl, the knit-slip, and a purl. The flanking knits and purls are worked on both sides of the fabric, so there are 2 stitches on each side for every 1 slip stitch you see. The slip stitch is layered behind the knit of the knit-slip combo. If I flip the end of the scarf to match up the sections, you can see that the knit section on this side matches up with the purl section on the other side, and that the knit-slip combo is the same in each section on both sides. I think the effect is great. Let's knit a row so you can see how to knit it with this combination, and specifically how to work the knit-slip combination. So, knit this side of the slip stitch rib, slip the other half with yarn in front so it's out of the way, and knit. The next vertical section is worked. Purl, knit the slip stitch rib, slip the other half with yarn in front again, and purl. I'll do it once more. Knit, knit, slip with yarn in front, knit, purl, knit, slip with yarn in front, purl. There are a few ways to write and diagram this stitch pattern. I'll write KS and use this symbol. So follow along with the diagram or write up. Knit, KS, knit, purl, KS, purl. The other side is worked the same as this side, so it's a 1-row repeat. The stitch pattern is technically an 8-stitch repeat if you separate the knit slip into a knit and a slip 1 with yarn in front. Then you write it as knit 2, slip 1 with yarn in front, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, slip 1 with yarn in front, and purl 1. I think of the knit slip as a 1-stitch combination because in this reversible stitch pattern it comes as a pair in the fabric. Also, in the project section, I'll discuss cast on and off techniques for this stitch pattern, and treating the knit slip as 1 stitch is helpful there. So I'll refer to this stitch pattern as a 6-stitch 1-row repeat. It's awesome either way. Feel free to let me know in the comments if you have thoughts on this. What about other stitch combinations using the knit slip combination? You can also incorporate the knit slip combo into a moss stitch background. It has a similar structured look as the ferro rib stitch from a couple of videos ago. Here's a sample. In this case, I have alternated a 3-stitch moss pattern with the reversible slip stitch rib. As I showed in the video on moss stitch, with an odd number of stitches, moss stitch is a 1-row repeat. So the slip stitch rib with moss stitch combination is also a 1-row repeat, my favorite kind. Here's a quick demo with a swatch. I've slipped the first stitch purlwise. Now the selvage is an excellent match with the knit slip, don't you think? 3-stitch moss is knit, purl, knit. Then knit the slip stitch, slip the other half purlwise with yarn in front, and repeat to the end. The moss is of course reversible, and the knit slip combo is layered. Isn't it awesome? Sorry, I can't help it. A variation here is to make the moss section wider or narrower, either 5-stitch or 1-stitch. Here I started the swatch with 3 stitches of moss in between the ribs, and then converted the middle moss stitch into the knit slip combo. Now the stitch pattern is very simple and similar to ferro rib. Knit, knit, slip. I'll demonstrate how to add slip stitch ribs in the middle of the work in the project section, as it's the same as the first row after the cast on. So what's so awesome about reversible slip stitch ribs? For me, the rib version and the moss version epitomize the awesomeness of reversible knitting. Instead of just considering what the fabric looks like on one side, these stitch patterns consider both sides, but also unify the fabric. These types of stitches are why I started this channel. Lots more of these in future videos, so back to reversible ribs. So what awesome projects can you make with reversible slip stitch ribs? Both of the stitch patterns look intriguing and are at the same time simple to knit, so lots of potential for beginner and experienced knitters. Even though the two stitch patterns I have shown you both use the knit-slip combo stitch, the resulting fabric is quite different. The rib version makes naturally wavy fabric, so is great for scarves and cowls, including infinity and Mobius worked lengthwise. Some of the waviness can be flattened a bit, with blocking for sure, if you like. For the white scarf project, as per usual, I have slipped the first stitch purlwise to make a nice selvage. I have started with the purl part and ended with the knit part, because when I made a swatch to check, the selvage looked the best this way. I'm excited to see the finished scarf. Let me know in the comments if you'd be interested in an update when I'm done, and I'll link the video in the description. The moss version is very flat. Here it is in the oversized sampler scarf that I have shown before. It's my favorite section, and I'm glad I made it red. The fabric is still stretchy enough that it works for a scarf like this, and the fabric thickness is very cozy. Again, I slipped the first stitch purlwise so that selvages and the reversible slip stitch ribs look the same. I love that feature of this stitch. For cast on and cast off edges, a common problem for rib patterns is flaring. This is mainly due to the cast on edges taking up more horizontal space than the pulled in ribs. Here's an example swatch. One way to avoid this is to use a cast on and cast off specific to ribbing that also pull in and are stretchy. There are lots of nice ones like ribbed and tubular cast-ons. You can also cast on fewer stitches and increase in the first row. This technique can be used for simple ribs like one knit, one purl, and also for the knit-slip combo stitch. A simple and seamless way to increase is to knit and purl into the same stitch. The knit forms the stitch on this side, and the purl forms the stitch on the other side of the fabric, and together they are the knit-slip combo stitch. This works really well because the knit-slip combo stitch uses up just one stitch worth of horizontal space in the fabric. If you cast on two stitches right away, then the cast on edge will be too wide, which will cause flaring. Counting the knit stitch combo as one stitch helps to cast on the right number of stitches. I use this technique for the cast on row of the scarf I'm working on, and also for the oatmeal swatch to increase the number of ribs in the middle of the fabric. I'll demonstrate with this swatch. Let's say I want to change the middle moss stitch in this section into a reversible slip stitch rib. The first stitch of the 3 moss is knit, then I knit and purl into the next stitch, then knit the 3rd moss stitch, then continue in pattern with the knit slip combo. I'll do the same for a few more on this side. On the other side of the work, I'll knit the purl increase from the other side and slip the knit increase so it looks seamless. Casting off or reducing the number of ribs is a bit more problematic, but definitely doable. The best that I can come up with is a slip-slip knit decrease for the cast-off edge and a slip-slip purl decrease for changing back to moss. Here's what that looks like. I'll cast off in pattern loosely and just slip the previous stitch over so it's not too stretchy. So knit loosely, slip the previous stitch over, purl, slip, knit, slip. When I get to the knit slip combo, I want to work them together or I'll get flaring. If I use a knit 2 together, then the slip stitch will be in front and the knit will end up in the back, and that will look weird. So I'll change the orientation of the stitches on the needles and knit both through the back loop. Here's what it looks like on this swatch. It's not perfect, but I think it'll do. Let me know if you come up with a better way in the comments. The decrease looks seamless, but it's a bit trickier. I've added a few more rows to the swatch from before, and now I'll decrease the slip stitch rib back to moss. To stay in pattern with moss, the stitch should look like a purl on this side and a knit on the other. So I'll change the orientation of the stitches on the needle again and purl them through the back loop. And after a few rows, the decrease blends in seamlessly. When I made this swatch, I immediately started picturing a shawl or a runner for the table using finer yarn, decay maybe. It starts all moss stitch, and then the slip stitch ribs start to appear one or two at a time. And then in the middle is the full width of alternating slip stitch rib with moss, or maybe even full double knit. And then on the other half, the ribs start to disappear one at a time until the other end is all moss again. I think it'll look great, but I suppose I should finish the scarf first. So what's next? I hope you enjoyed exploring these exclusive stitch patterns that use the reversible slip stitch rib. Let me know in the comments if you have more ideas on how to use this concept in combination with other stitch patterns. For the next video, I'm exploring garter stitch. Don't click away. I know it's super simple to knit, just knit across for every row, kind of boring. So I will focus on lots of different ideas on how to use garter stitch to make awesome reversible projects, including shaping and construction techniques, including this funky little scarf that I call my candy wrapper scarflet. So pick up your knitting and create something awesome. I'll do my best to respond to comments, and I'd love to hear about your favorite reversible knitting pattern. Also, feel free to subscribe to my channel for more awesome reversible knitting. For those of you still here, the last few years I've been working hard to find simple ways to feel better, what I call my daily well-being practices. This is not medical advice, I'm just sharing what works for me. Today's well-being practice is to give yourself a break. I've decided that there's a big difference between making excuses versus taking a needed break. I know I'm procrastinating when I don't really feel better taking a break, and maybe worse. Then I need to examine what the barrier is to moving forward, not always as simple as it sounds, and sometimes it requires a break anyway. Other times I need to listen to my inner self to take a break if I'm pushing myself too hard or if I need some time to let my brain rest and reflect. Regardless, I know that it's a good type of break if I can get back to work after a while without too much trouble. I have noticed that both using knitting as a break and taking a break from knitting can be effective and required. An old adage is, a change is as good as a break. So we should remember not to be too hard on ourselves and give ourselves a break. It doesn't have to be perfect. There are lots of videos about procrastinating and being kind to ourselves. They are easy to find. Have a great day. Both use the knit slip combo stitch. Say that 10 times fast. And even though the two stitch patterns I have shown you both use the knit slip combo stitch, the resulting fabric is quite different. Knit, slip, combo stitch.